Hello, I'm Britta. Today I want to look at Blacksad. What is Blacksad, you say? It's a game, of course, and it is also a series of graphic novels. Now, as you'll probably instantly deduce, the game is based on this particular franchise of graphic novels. I need to say straight away that this is a very, very European style comics series or graphic novel series. I don't think it has done terribly well in the United States from what I hear, but it has a big following in many European countries. Let's look at that and how this has influenced this. And what's more, there is quite a story behind this game. And I want to take a closer look today at what really went on with Blacksad, the terrible problems they had at release, and what's happened since. And I will show you a bit from my gameplay experience with the game, and will give you, as always, my straightforward opinion on how well they've done with this game. Were they able to turn around the fate of Blacksad? The books are published as novels, but I think the individual installments are probably published separately. So you could say it's a collection of connected short stories. Blacksad is written by two Spanish authors, Juan Diaz Canales and Juanjo Guarnido. That's as close as my Spanish pronunciation will get, I'm afraid. The first edition came out in 2010, and this is the American edition published by Dark Horse Comics. As usual, that publisher has done a beautiful job, and I will intersperse a few pictures from the book on the screen, which is easier than me holding it up. So what is Blacksad about? It is set in an alternate 1950s world. It has a very strong noir or hard-boiled detective fiction touch to it. The interesting thing is it is set in an entirely anthropomorphic universe. And that is, of course, one of the fascinations of this story, the depth and detail of the world building. So you can expect a riveting tale of investigation of murder, corruption, shenanigans. It's a big wild world, and it's told very vibrantly. The first story in the book is a bit of a sort of flashback to John Blacksad's earlier days, and explains a bit about his background, and after that you go into the main part of this story collection, which deals with a lot of social issues, including racism. I also need to mention that the books are definitely not aimed at children or younger readers. There is some nudity in there, just that you're aware. While the whole anthropomorphic scene may sort of suggest a more light-hearted approach for the younger age groups, that is in fact not the case. The stories are deeply serious, quite realistic, and clearly have an adult audience in mind. The game is rated age 16 in Europe, and I think that's entirely appropriate. So what happened with the game? Well, tighten your seatbelts, it's quite a story. The game was developed by a small Spanish developer studio called Pendulo, At the time they were doing this game, they had just 17 staff. It was the first time they had ever attempted a 3D game. They worked closely with the authors of the comic series, but the story is standalone. In the game, you investigate the death of a boxing club owner in 1950s New York. The back blurb reads, "A dark corruption scandal in New York City underworld." So you know what to expect. By the way, they call this a limited edition. Well, it's got a few little extras. I'll just show you. The cover employs a lenticular type of card insert, and obviously that won't show up well on camera, but it gives that sort of 3D depth effect. The game itself, and a few art cards. Not many, but they're printed on a very thick card. So that's John Blacksad himself, the private investigator. The game has the subtitle Under the Skin. In the comic stories, I think, from what I remember, Blacksad is in fact what they call a tuxedo cat, indicating that he has a mixed parentage background. And there are a few other characters from the game. O'Leary, the Irish bookie, one of the members of the boxing club, and Sonia Dunn. And you will meet all these people once I show you a bit of the gameplay. The game released in 2019. I can't remember exactly when I bought it, maybe a year later. It was heavily reduced, it was on clearance sale because the game had not been well reviewed and obviously copies weren't selling. So I basically just picked it up on a whim, then realised that it was based on a graphic novel series, so then decided to get one of the books to familiarise myself more with the world and the stories, and how well they transitioned the characters and the types of stories from the book to the game. Now, you might think if this is a private detective investigation story that it might be sort of point and click like a lot of them are, but in fact it isn't. It has direct character control, so the player is the agent of the action happening, and a lot of the action takes place via QTEs. Not my favourite form of control, but we'll see how I went with that. The voice acting has generally been praised and is pretty good. Of course, the role of John Blacksad is crucial, and they wanted someone with a deep voice for that, so they hired Barry Johnson, who's especially known for Detroit Become Human. The developers have been quite open about the problems they had developing the game with such a small staff and no prior experience with 3D. What caused additional problems was a very unfortunate event because the game released prematurely by accident on European console platforms. So both for the Xbox and PlayStation, the game was made available before the real release date and before the team had a chance to do the last fixing and introduce the all-important Day 1 patch. One Spanish commentator in the gaming reviewing scene in Spain characterized the rollout of the game as simply disastrous. And he said it was an example of how to do things wrong when it comes to putting a game on sale. Patches were soon after issues to fix many of the problems, but they weren't able to iron out absolutely everything. And that is obviously something I will be looking into when I do my review of the game in a moment. So the review scores for Blacksad Under the Skin roughly converge around the 60 mark on Metacritic. 59 for PlayStation, 69 for Xbox, and 60 for the Switch. So you could say roughly around 60. That is to a large part due to the huge amount of technical problems that were present right at release. There are extensive patch notes available on the publisher's website, Microids, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. The game is available on PC, Windows and macOS, PlayStation 4, Xbox One and the Switch. If you're wondering what other games the Spanish developer Pendulo has been involved with, most recently they have had Yesterday Origins in 2016, Alfred Hitchcock Vertigo in 2021, and in 2023 they had Tintin reporter Cigars of the Pharaoh. So that is the background to the game. Very, very briefly, I tried to compress it as much as possible. A lot was written and talked about it at the time because, understandably, the European comics community, the comic files, I think they're called, were hugely excited about a game coming out. And for people who are interested in adventure-type games like this, strong narrative games, they became interested, obviously, in the original form, the books, the graphic novels, as I did. So let's get serious and dive into Blacksad Under the Skin. What does it look like? How does it play? Is it worth experiencing? Is it really, really as bad as the majority of the reviews at the time indicated? Most of the reviews date back to the early part of 2020 or even November, December 2019 when the game came out. As is the norm with game reviewing, a game gets reviewed as is at the time of release. If problems and bugs and glitches and performance are fixed maybe months down the road, there are very few outlets that will pick that up and inform their readers about it. I only know of one or two channels that specialise in that type of attention. And this can, of course, be a serious problem for smaller studios, indie developers. They've got a release date set by the publisher. They are trying their hardest to meet that, and the game just isn't quite ready. It isn't really polished enough, but it has to go out, and the fallout from that can be disastrous, as we saw with Blacksad and so many other games in recent years. A really big major developer may be able to handle that much better and claw back ground they lost in the initial days after release. But for an indie studio that's not that well known anyway, and that might be lucky to get a handful of reviews, this could be, curtains for the sales of a particular game. I've had a similar situation with Baldo. I reported on that in my video on that most charming game, Baldo, Guardian of the Owls. How did it turn out for Blacksad? Yes, let's finally have a look. Thank you for your patience. The title screen straight away shows us a grim scene. As I said before, this is not a game for children. We are in a boxing gym in 1950s New York. This is the opening of the game, and I'm only going to show you scenes that provide no major spoilers. Most of what you will see is basically scene setting and a bit of background. There is a good tutorial which I recommend because the game has a few features that are different from other games. I am showing you the loading screen in full so you know what you're up against. The first scene introduces us to Blacksad's detective office and what I would call a sub-story in the game.
Sometimes when I walk into my office, I get the feeling that I'm walking among the ruins of a lost civilization. Not because of the reigning disorder, but because it feels like the remains of the civilized person I used to be.
Where is that damn detective? I'm gonna rip his head off. I swear I'll tear his eyes out. Hey! Hand over the pictures, you bastard! Now!
Which intertwines with the main story, so we get a bit of an idea of what it's all about. The characters are fully voiced throughout, and I think you'll agree the voice acting is excellent and really brings the story to life.
2 days ago!
Ah, curious, are you? Plenty of things you could learn through.
I'm gonna kill!
Here you are introduced to that staple of action-adventure games, the QTE. The game uses QTEs a lot, and occasionally this causes problems with timing and precision, something I hope I can demonstrate a bit later via some other clips.
Get me the goddamn pictures!
So let's try this again with different options.
I'm gonna kill you!
It wasn't the first time I regretted hitting a guy like him. But at least I bought enough time to aim at his soft spots.
The dialogue nicely matches that laconic tone we know from the hard-boiled crime fiction of writers like Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett.
You broke my jaw!
Well, now it matches your marriage.
If you show my wife those pictures, I'm dead meat. You'll ruin my life, please!
I don't enjoy meddling in others' affairs, but it's my job, and I've got bills to pay. You're the one cheating on your wife, buddy. This is on you.
Hey, deal?
For as long as I could remember, I had collected nothing more than bad gigs, debt, and sorrow. My self-respect and bank account were racing to see who'd hit rock bottom first.
Here you see an example of the decisions you've taken during the conversations having a direct effect on the story, what happens down the line.
1.
There are many dialogue decisions to make and many consequences to contemplate before you can reach one of the possible 6 endings. This opening scene looks really good to me. I would say they spent a lot of time and care on getting it right. In particular, Blacksad, as the main character, has received a lot of attention with the details, the animation, etc. However, the other character models are, I think, a bit more hit or miss.
You see what I said about my pal Blacksad? Doesn't even know you, and he's already offering you a seat.
So now we're being introduced to the main story and investigation involving Sonia Dunn, whom we saw right at the beginning on the title page. She is the woman who walked into the gym and discovered her father hanging from a rope, apparently having committed suicide. And Jake the gorilla acting as her bodyguard, another boxer from the gym, of course. Here the investigation proper starts, and you learn how to assemble all the little clues, which if you've played any detection game before you will be familiar with. Sonia Dunn is supposed to be very attractive, but I don't know about you, I don't think they really hit it out of the park with this model. Now I want to show you a cool feature. It's not new to adventure games, but I think they did it really well. At any point you can go and scroll back through the whole history or story of the game. It's like a comic book with all the scenes. It's a great aid memoir if you're returning to the game after maybe a break and need to remind yourself of what exactly happened. But more importantly, you can return to any of these waypoints, because, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of decisions to make along the way, and you may wish to explore a different route. There is a sports-themed Hall of Fame for collectibles in the game. It's quite a neat idea. You see, you can collect little cut-up bits of sports trading cards, which you can then stick in an album, hopefully to complete the picture. These cards can be hard to find, which is fair enough, but the tricky thing is, due to the often awkward and sluggish controls, it can prove nigh impossible in some cases to get to the card and trigger the control for being able to pick it up. I vividly remember one occasion in a toilet of all places where I spent nearly 15 minutes juggling fractions of a millimeter on the controller, trying to get into a corner where I knew a card was hidden and I could see the prompt sort of flashing for it, but you literally couldn't get at it. Well, I did manage it in the end, but that is pure obsession. I'll show you now Blacksad's cat sensors, which he uses to explore and investigate persons of interest. This feature reminds me a lot of the one you find in the Sherlock Holmes games by Frogwares. You can see how many clues you need to find in each area, and the main navigation proceeds via the right stick. You need to zoom in and find and activate a particular spot. And I found that it's not difficult as such, it's just fiddly. You go sort of backwards and forwards. Obstinate controls like this show the PC origin of this type of game, and mouse control would obviously be preferable here. Little arrows indicate in which direction to move, and finally I've got the point.
He's clenching his fist, a sign of contained anger.
I turn back one more time, and wouldn't you know it, there's a card hiding down there. The cards are strictly for collectors and trophy hunters. Only once you have exhausted all the options with the telephone are you afterwards allowed to collect the card. I guess it's a way of making sure that you do make that crucial phone call.
What if you show me Yale's report and I buy you dinner?
You're handsome, all right, but I'm not stupid.
Now we come to the important deduction phase. I hope this selection of clues won't actually mean anything to you. So just to demonstrate that you basically pick and mix, try to match 2 clues together. Sometimes you have to do 3 to get a result, like here. Then I noticed a new hotspot I hadn't seen before.
Ugh.
We get a new clue. The game says there's a new deduction possible, and I went through all the permutations, but maybe I had a clue missing somewhere, I don't know. That does happen as well. I just carry on in that case and try to find more clues. So I have 2 points of criticism so far about the game. One concerns the graphics, in that I find many of the character models often quite chunky, even a bit untidy looking. The other point concerns the controls, which are at times sluggish, sometimes imprecise, often need a lot of fiddling backwards and forwards. But what about that major criticism that almost every reviewer mentioned at the time the game was released, that there were frequent crashes, freezes, lost saves? Well, I can only say that playing it on both the PS4 and PS5, I have had 0 problems concerning technical reliability. There may be performance issues at times, but I have experienced not one crash, not one freeze, me having to restart the game, anything like that. I have gone through the developers' extensive patch notes carefully, and I'll put a link to that in the video description below. I can only conclude that they did a heap of work in the months after release and eliminated many of those most grievous issues. Obviously, the game is now in much better condition than it was at release. There is one aspect of the game concerning both the length of the story and the way the story and gameplay are structured that was a bit of an issue for me personally. It may not be for you, it all depends. The game has a very decent length for an action-adventure game. I would say an average of possibly around 12 hours to complete, and maybe a bit more if you want to 100% everything. The story itself is good and is well told, as you can see from what I'm showing you.
I was expecting some frozen bodies.
But for me, unfortunately, the gameplay proved a bit repetitive, because once you know all the mechanics you need to be able to get clues and solve puzzles, etc., you simply have to work your way steadily through the game's storyline. So it lacked a little bit of that drive, that impetus for me to keep me interested with the gameplay. I mention it because it's also very, very different to how the stories in the book are told. The print stories are fairly short and very compressed. A story of just 20 pages has a huge impact because you're only shown crucial scenes as a reader, and you have to fill in the blanks in between, which of course gets your imagination going. They're a wonderful example of telling a big story in a very short space and time. This story, due to the painstaking gameplay of being a detective and investigating, is quite the opposite. And I guess I missed that intoxicating rush you get when you read the stories. But as I said, if you love this type of adventure game, playing as the detective, then this may not be an issue for you. I would have been fine if the game had only been 6 to 8 hours playtime. On the other hand, the developers certainly did a good job of creating the whole atmosphere of the 1950s semi-underworld in the sports scene in New York. I now have to switch over to my footage from the PS4 Pro. I have to warn you straight up that the audio from the PS4 Pro recordings is not terribly good. There's always a bit of white noise in the background, which is rather annoying, and therefore I turn the sound down quite a lot. Just that you're aware of that, please. But that was my first playthrough, and I captured a few more important scenes there that I want to show you.
A Crossler? The good news is, I don't need lockpicks to open it. The bad news, I didn't bring explosives.
There aren't many outdoor scenes, but those that we do get, I think, capture the atmosphere really well. So I just wanted to show you a little bit. Here we have another example for a small but fateful decision. Step into the car or not. I have played out the options, and trust me, quite different outcomes occur. We see the typical hard-boiled crime fiction style being displayed here, complete with laconic wit from our detective, Blacksad.
Wrinkles make you uncomfortable. I always play it nice and safe.
Talking of hard-boiled, there's a nice personality profile you can consult during your gameplay to tweak how you would like Blacksad to react and what personality trait for him to have. Here's a scene sharply portraying the alternate post-war New York world, with the excellent dialogue steeped in rather black humour. Unfortunately, the war veteran, who is, I think, supposed to be a goat, well, his character model looks rough to me and verges on being unpleasant, which doesn't really help the cause. Now I'll introduce you to one of my favourite characters, Weekly the reporter.
Weekly. What the hell are you doing here?
Hey, look! Isn't that Cassidy?
Don't change the subject, you sad little...
Why don't we settle this over ice cream, huh, John? Just like in the good old days.
How did you get up here? I don't want anyone to see you. Foul-smelling Weekly is no exception. No matter what he does, it's impossible to stay mad at him for too long.
This bourbon shake is delicious. Want a taste?
You know I don't like milk. The real question is, why did he commit suicide?
Well, it's pretty obvious.
Is that so? Care to shed some light on this, Sherlock?
Well, there's no need to look for reasons. People hang themselves every day out of sadness. And stuff like that. End of story.
I'd say he never recovered from his wife's death.
This was a conversation where I explored all the different options. This turned out to be one of those where the outcome was pretty much predetermined.
People hang themselves every day out of sadness. And stuff like that. End of story.
It's no secret that boxing and corruption go hand in hand.
You're a lucky man, John Blacksad.
I don't follow.
You just found the thorough detective you need.
Oh, of course. What a great idea. How did I not think of you?
Hey, don't sweat it. But you'll have to do me a favor. Okay, you win.
Spoiler alert, this is an important scene, but I have edited out the giveaway clues. This was the QTE sequence that, for me, was the worst, because it wasn't precise and responsive enough. Let's see how we first focus in, trying to find the crucial spot. It's great how Blacksad works a lot with smell. The detection for some spots can be frustrating, but here it is.
So, that's why you were sitting there.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, you do. Could you step aside so I can check, please?
Please go.
Mary, for Christ's sake, put that knife down, would you?
Leave or I'll...
Mary, please, calm down.
I mean it.
I don't want to hurt you.
Leave her alone!
Here we go into an extended QTE fight sequence. The triangle triggers a tray appearing. And it gets really awkward here, trying to detect the spot within the time given. Back to fighting, and then back to the tray again. I'm getting a little closer, but boy, this is awkward. Trying to anticipate those arrows is not that easy, and there's a noticeable delay between clicking the button and it registering. I managed to draw out this fight a bit longer, but I'm not sure exactly how that worked. I wish there was a cup of tea on that tray. Yes, I finally nailed the blighter. So now Blacksad has a tray as a shield and weapon. Great. How do you feel about lengthy QTE sequences? I find them just a bit much, and I weary of them. In short bursts, they're okay. Hey, he's a professional boxer and my Blacksad is tired. But we get an instant new try. He is tiring too, and when I manage to avoid his left fist, he suddenly collapses. End of fight. Obviously, I'm not very good at QTEs with my arthritic hands and slower reflexes. You will likely manage these sequences much faster, but at least I hope this example can help you figure out whether the controls are acceptable for you or not. Overall, I enjoyed my time with the Blacksad game, with the proviso of the criticism I have already mentioned. So let me sum up my thoughts on Blacksad Under the Skin. The scriptwriters have adapted the comics books material really faithfully, I think. This is one for Blacksad fans. There is real immersion in carrying out detective tasks directly in a 3D environment. The voice acting is a bit of a mixed bag, but Blacksad himself is outstanding. There's a real sense that your choices do matter for how the story turns out, and with 6 different endings there's a lot of replayability. I have already homed in on my criticisms throughout the videos, so these points should come as no surprise. I take into account that the game is now 5 years old and that it represents a very ambitious project for a rather small studio. However, flaws and faults, as I see them, need to be mentioned. Balance and fairness. If you're curious what Pendulo Studio have done after Blacksad, I've put together a little 2-minute clip for you about their new game, Tintin, Cigars of the Pharaoh.
How did this get... Huh?
Is your name Tintin? And is your name Snowy?
You can see straight away that the graphics are much improved. It looks pretty nice, I think. You sometimes play as Snowy, another one of those gameplay mechanics sequences that Pendulo seem to love. They're not bad, but I still manage to fail them sometimes. Tintin is of course a famous IP, and I think again Pendulo have managed to capture that special authentic feel and look of the original Tintin or Tintin.
No, there's no way you can be hungry again.
Stop it! Catch it!
Stop what? Catch what? Are you all right, sir?
And here's another one of those timed catch-it-if-you-can games.
I believe it must be the royal cipher of Kiosk. And I, Sophocles Sarcophagus, will be the first Egyptologist to reveal his tomb to the world. If you're interested, why not join me in Port Said's old town tomorrow and we'll look for the tomb together?
Certainly. We would like that. Right, Snowy?
Until tomorrow then, dear friend. Goodbye, little man. I beg your pardon, Captain.
What an odd character.
As always, thank you for your time. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.